morning, Daithí. You're welcome back to the Handshake. We're now looking at blog number 9A of 10. Imagine we've nearly gone the full 10 at this stage. I founded the whole podcast concept on the conviction that we as humans must preserve the human connection, the power of networking, collaborating, teamwork, and the development of soft skills, particularly in our young. Using AI as a tool to assist us in achieving our true human potential on that journey. And then you entered the scene with this invitation to have a chat in relation to the content of each of your blogs. So we've gone as far as blog number 9A, titled Safeguarding Student Data in AI-Driven Education Systems post February the 2nd, 2025, i.e. the EU AI Act regulations, integrating UNESCO's AI frameworks. So reality and evolving best practices globally. That's our title. And as with each introduction, I invite you, Daithí, to describe the elephant in the room.
Lisa, once again, thank you for the opportunity to have the handshake meet the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
Blog 9A was never something that was going to happen. It was to be 10 blogs to incite debate, to open the discussion, to go beyond the spoon of sugar, to look at the diabetes as well as the sugar cane, to look at AI as hashtag AI for good, hashtag AI equity of opportunity, but not to forget the Darth Vader in the room.
Sure.
When the EU AI Act came out, it was something which all of the nations of the EU believed would be the way forward to ensure all of those things that society perceived to be vital for humanity to flourish, to grow, to be protected. And in that case, Blog 9A came, and if I may for a moment, the European Artificial Intelligence Act, which entered into force on August the 1st, 2024, introduced specific requirements regarding AI literacy that became effective on February the 2nd, 2025. According to Article 356 of the AI Act, this is very important, Teresa, and I would ask the listeners to just bear with me here. This isn't your normal Daithí, but I think it's important that we understand this. In the Act, AI literacy is defined as the skills, knowledge, and understanding that enable providers, deployers, and affected persons to make informed decisions about the deployment of AI systems. This encompasses awareness of both the opportunities and risks associated with AI, as well as the potential harms it may cause. Now, in what it says, Article 4 of the AI mandates that all providers and deployers, those who provide and those who deploy what's written of AI systems, must take measures to ensure, to the best of their ability, now watch that, to the best of their ability, that their staff and other individuals involved in the operations and use of AI systems on their behalf possess a sufficient level of AI literacy. So what the hell are they talking about?
There is implied responsibility there, isn't there?
Oh, very much, but let's keep going. This requirement takes into account the technical knowledge. Holy moly, technical knowledge, education, and training of the personnel, as well as the context in which AI systems are to be used, and the individuals or groups upon whom the AI systems will be applied. So you have to have the technical knowledge, experience, education, and training. You are obliged legally to do this before someone can actually deploy. Now, In practice, this means organizations must implement the appropriate training and educational programs to ensure that all of their personnel can effectively and responsibly operate their AI systems. And this includes understanding how to, now I know this is getting heavy, how to interpret your AI outputs. Holy Mary, every person in every company that is using any form of AI system and deploys it must know how to interpret those outputs. In other words, they must understand the coding and the algorithm, recognize potential biases, and be aware of the ethical and legal implications of the AI deployment. There is no definition of ethics which is globally acknowledged or recognized as being conformity. There is no continent into which you can go, or even into, I'd even call it any form of cultural environment where the word ethics can have a clear, defined, accepted global definition or meaning. But let's keep going. The goal is to equip individuals with the necessary competencies, again, to make informed decisions regarding the AI systems, thereby promoting their safe and ethical use. Okay, it's important to note that the AI literacy requirement applies to all AI systems, regardless of their risk classification. And in the EU AI Act, we have those risk classifications.
Right.
So even in a safe use of AI, you have to train, understand, know how, ethical, responsible. So that would mean even for a teacher working with AI with 4-year-olds in an environment to help them with their literacy, the children are supposed to understand everything. And the teacher is supposed to be trained in the whole system, the background system, the knowledge, etc., etc. But let's keep going because this is important. Therefore, organizations utilizing any form of AI, this is in the Act, must ensure compliance with this provision post February the 2nd, 2025. Now, here's the thing.
If they don't?
Well, here's the thing. Thank you for asking. While the AI Act, you're going to love this one, does not prescribe specific penalties for non-compliance.
Yeah.
It does not prescribe specific penalties for non-compliance with the AI literacy requirement. Failure to meet this obligation could be considered when determining penalties for other infringements under the Act. Consequently, organizations are encouraged to proactively develop and implement AI literacy programs tailored to their specific use cases and the needs of their personnel.
Well, it's
in other words, here is what you have. Sorry, go ahead.
It's presupposing too much. Keep going. Sorry.
It's no one on the blogs has seen me this angry ever. It is like taking a goat and telling the goat that they can eat anything that they can see in the field. But I'm going to spancel your 4 legs. And until you learn how to untie the 4 legs, you can't eat. But it's okay to eat. And if you eat what's around you and you untie the 4 legs, even though I didn't tell you what type of knots are in the 4 legs, because they're all different types of knots, then you have the right to eat. But be careful what you eat, because if you eat the wrong thing, then you can be punished for it, because it may not be ethically correct to eat that flower because it's protected. But I don't know how I'm going to punish you yet, because I don't know how to protect that flower, but I'm going to train you about that flower while you're trying to untie the knots to eat the grass around you so you can survive. And by the way, your mother goat is responsible for training you how to eat it properly, not eat that flower because it's protected in an environment that is also protected. And the mother goat really doesn't know how to untie the knots because no one has put out a program to actually define what AI literacy is for you. So therefore, in other words, actually, hold on a minute. I'm sorry, Teresa, this is the first enforcement of the EUA Act, which I believe is vital for humanity to be at a point where the human AIology can grow together. The handshake meets the algorithm.
I think it's well intentioned, but it's unobtainable. And the horse has bolted. This should have happened 5 years ago.
50 years ago when it started. It's not that it's unobtainable. What we're doing is we're being reactive. It's like when the referee isn't watching a game of football and some woman, or them hits the other player on box in the head and the ref doesn't see it. The ref comes back afterwards, has to look at the VAR, has to consult with the Lions people. The game is held up, everyone's getting bored. It's all reactive. Now, I would like to acknowledge that the EUA Act is a document written from a place of protecting the EU citizens in a world that Christy Dignam, that wonderful Irish singer in Aslan with a group in Ireland, said, how can I protect you in this crazy world? And the fact is that as AI is now revolutionizing in an ever revolving way, everything we are and do and say, we are now trying to regulate something that was written in 2021, by the way, the EUAI Act, only came in 2024. In terms of AI, that's like 300 years ago. And now that we have DeepSeek coming from China, which is an incredible model also, OpenAI and Sam Altman and those would say that it's now, the fathers of AI would say, the godfathers would say that it's now gone to a stage which is beyond Moore's law. ASI that we've spoken about is now AI rewriting itself right now. We began our own LLM model in Europe, and President von der Leyen brings out her new program called Invest AI with 200 billion. We are providing Formula One cars on open roads where we're trying to write the regulations after the fact in the hope that we will have an ethical, professional, agreed way of utilizing this. And the United Kingdom and America both refuse to go and sign up the Paris Accord because they don't want to be restricted by anything. In other words, my mother used to say this: the lunatics are now in charge of the asylum. And you know what? That might be a bad thing because, in my opinion, the only thing that was ever wrong with a huge amount of many people who were put into many asylums would be that the world was the crazy place, not them.
They were out of step,
But the world was out of step. So it's a very interesting time. And I would like to acknowledge that. The elephant in the room now is very simple. Darth Vader has at long last come to the fore, and people have left him out of the box. Forget about Pandora's box. This is Darth Vader box, because we have now taken, and I want to thank the French for running this open forum, because they have now presented to the world very clearly something which we thought was the reality. China signed up because they realize we want to share everything with the rest of the world, because there's going to be an equity of opportunity. But is there? What the hell is bias? I don't know. America and United Kingdom decided to run their own race, and we have our own LLM with super mega computers. This is going to be.
So
it's good. How do I? Sorry, I'm new. No, I hope people are understanding. You've never seen me like this in the blog, any of you. I actually, for the first time, am saying to myself, oh my God, I should have said the elephants in the room.
Not one. So your blog tackles the intersection of AI regulation and educational data protection at a crucial point. Given that educational institutions often operate with legacy systems and varying levels of AI literacy among staff, how do you envision the practical implementation of AI Act's sufficient AI literacy requirement in educational settings, particularly when it comes to protecting student data while still maintaining the innovative potential of AI-driven learning systems?
From my first rant, I'm so sorry, listeners.
Mm-hmm.
How can you have, let's take the school environment, and the obligations of, we call it Articles 4 and 5. First of all, you've got to teach, train, prepare your teachers to interpret AI outputs. You've got to teach, train, prepare them, etc., to recognize potential biases. And you've got to make them aware of ethical and legal implications of that AI deployment and equip them with the necessary competences to make informed decisions when it comes down to any form of data. In other words, you want every person, forget about your leader and the leadership team in education. Forget about the implications for this for departments of education and ministers and for national policy. But you're expecting everyone to be an AI encyclopedia on what data is and what data protection is and the systems that ensure non-bias, that ensure ethical compliance. In other words, you're asking a 4-year-old, I'm going to put it this way, you're asking a 4-year-old to become an aeronautic engineer to ensure that that Boeing 747 doesn't exist anymore, can fly perfectly, ethically, unbiased, unrestricted in the sky. How can you do that, Teresa?
But the training of teachers hasn't even commenced. I mean, where are we at? How can we even catch up on this aspiration?
Yeah, forget about training. What is AI literacy?
I know.
So what was last week? What was AI? And then all of a sudden, there comes DeepSeek, a different form of OpenAI. Now we've got a European LLM. In other words, AI literacy is not the definition of literacy that we know it by. AI literacy is a revolution of multi-literacies in various, I would nearly put it, multimodal dimensions of possibility, of permutations and combinations of everything that we thought existed in the multimodal load. I would have called many years ago, when I would have come up with the concept of streams education. Yes. STEM became STEAM. A was thrown in for the creatives. Streams brought OR, 21st century multimodal literacies, and S was sustainability. And back then people said to me, what are you doing? Are you off your head? Now we realize that OR, which was in the European project of streams, actually is 21st century multi-literacies. And yet we talk about children, should that poor child is dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysorthographia. We're no longer talking about the definition of literacy. We're now talking about a multimodal definition of literacy that is constantly, like quicksand, changing at all times as these bigger models come out.
Yeah. The pace of change is we can't even measure it. And we talk about singularity.
Well, we've talked about it. We've talked about singularity and what it's there. And I saw different people in different articles over the last week or two and on various news programs saying that this is all dystopian. It's all like out there. What are you worried about? AI is at a point right now where it is actually reprogramming itself. Super intelligent AI is becoming a major reality. All the things that people are calling dystopian are happening as we speak. But there are none so blind as those who do not wish to see.
The EU AI Act specifically prohibits AI systems that exploit vulnerabilities of specific groups in education. This could include profiling students based on socioeconomic backgrounds or learning differences, for example. How do you see this intersecting with the growing trend of personalized learning algorithms?
Remember, log one, don't shoot the messenger. The AI is not the problem or the issue. It is the human being that's coding. But now I'm going to go to a separate point. Because AI is now reprogramming itself, what is the definition of bias? What is the definition of inequity, inequality, and literacy? And because we said it is different globally, even though it should not be, because the fact is that hashtag AI for equity of opportunity beyond equality should be something that I do believe, I'm going to put myself out there. I actually do believe that we ask AI to write its coding so that it can care for what you spoke about there. I actually believe that would do a hell of a better job than 99.9% of the humans coding it there. But how do we ensure it? Right now, if you think of the analogy of the goat I had, you can't ensure it because we're trying to ensure something by restricting, by penalizing, by forcing. You can't do this because the playing field is ever changing.
Yeah. So you in section 3 of your blog, you talk about adopting a robust regulatory framework. Aligning with global and regional regulatory frameworks is essential to ensuring that AI applications in education prioritize student safety and data protection. So just for a moment, let's just examine the practical challenges of risk categorization and compliance. Take Spain's pilot program. It offers an interesting case study in AI compliance. But many education institutions are struggling with the fundamental task of accurately categorizing their AI systems by risk level. So when an education institution is implementing an adaptive learning system, they're faced with multiple interconnected risks, from bias in learning path recommendations to potentially discriminatory assessment patterns. So could you walk us through a concrete example of how an institution should conduct their risk assessment, particularly focusing where algorithm bias might be hiding in seemingly neutral adaptive learning processes?
You're asking me to write a Daithí, D-A-I-T-H-A-I act.
What would it look like?
Okay. First of all, when we talk about Spain, the reason I would have put in Spain's pilot program on AI-based adaptive learning systems was because Rodriguez et al. In 2023 spoke about this. And they looked at, I think maybe we need to just take a second to look at what is the EU Artificial Intelligence Act risks. Remember, they underlined them by, first of all, imagine our triangle. At the bottom of the triangle, you've got minimal risk. And then you've got what we call limited risk. You've got high risk and you've got an acceptable risk. In the minimal risk area, if you think of what's there, that's utilizing AI in an environment with a minimal risk. So it could be, for example, I'll take a simple one. Because mathematics is a pure language, if you're using AI in the idea of helping children in a personalized, intelligent tutoring place to learn to count to 5, junior infants. So AI is doing Hain do trí ceathair cúig in Gaelic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. That is a minimal risk. So therefore, in that, that's easy to basically do what you've just said. Because there's no obligation on anyone. But don't forget, Articles 4 and 5 said we have to have trained, prepared, give them the knowledge so the teacher understanding members of the GOAT. Now, if we go to transparency obligation, limited risk, we're talking about using chatbots. We're talking about being able to have emotional recognition. We're talking about biometric areas, and it could be a deep fake. So you could have, for example, a chatbot teaching the child how to count to 1 to 5 and go 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. And 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. Now, someone could easily put out a deep fake into that one and could have someone with maybe, as we saw with Mr. Macron, let's be clear here, how he showed himself as a female model doing TikTok. The other night, people saw this. Actually, that scared the living daylights out of people, that a president of a country could be superimposed in a multimodal way and show himself as to the dangers of AI. But in doing that, by the way, is child's play in AI right now. That was available 2 years ago, to be able to use these deep fakes. And indeed, we do know how deep fake has been used in an awful lot of other parts around the world. So this, by the way, is only considered to be limited risk, which is the second level. So how do you actually bring a compliance and minimal risk? It's not that difficult, because in an environment in education, because the teacher is still not just the center on this, the sage on the stage, because the teacher is there in a constructionist way, helping the children to construct their own learning, or construct the VIST in the center of the classroom, working with them, then that can be looked at in a limited risk within an enclosed environment in a classroom. I keep taking the classroom. Now, the high risk, conformity of assessment. When you're talking about employment, education, public services, safety components of everything from webinars, vehicles, what's happening out there producing. Once we come to high risk, there is no way on this earth, because of the capacity to communicate with people now in so many multimodal ways, in so many frequencies, in so many years, there is virtually impossible to monitor or safeguard or police. Oh God, I'm using the word that Orwell in 1984. Oh, sweet Daithí. To police high risk. But you can have algorithms running around, what I would now call a nanny algorithm, because we all have our nannies, and our nannies are there to take care of us. And very often, nannies take care of us as granddads do, because they can give us back. But if we put a nanny algorithm running around the other algorithms to protect, to knock out the high risk, to take out the even I'm going to say, the unethical issues, the biased issues, those that are not acknowledged as being compliant, then we have a system. But who's to say that you don't write an anti-nanny algorithm to knock out the nanny algorithm? Now we come to number 4, the unacceptable risk, which are things that are prohibited. That would be everything for the idea of societal scoring, mass surveillance, the idea of manipulation of behavior to cause harm. That's the 4th level. How do you stop that? It's actually nearly easier to stop that high risk than it is to stop the easier risk, because let's face it, Teresa, you are in that whole area of behavioral psychology. You know that if you come out and you start shouting crazy things, most people won't listen. But if you have an undercurrent of it's okay to do this, it's okay, come on, everything is fine, and eventually bring people with you bit by bit, and we're back to just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine, and all of a sudden we keep giving them a little more sugar, a little more sugar, a little more sugar, which, by the way, is more addictive than that, than even crack cocaine, etc. Then the fact is that we can bit by bit destroy. So how do we do it? My honest opinion is that, once again, the EUA Act has clearly laid out the levels of risk. How can we do it? We need to have, and I do believe this, that level of literacy that is laid out in Articles 4 and 5. But how do we achieve that when the literacy is changing? So we're going to be running after this all the time.
Yeah, we're behind. Yeah, we're not apace.
And I'm going to get shot here. Let AI rewrite the AI to overtake the AI that's going to take out the AI, so the AI can be the AI, to ensure that it's not going to be the AI, but who's going to write the algorithm to take out the algorithm is going to destroy the algorithm that prevents the algorithm from doing what the algorithm was supposed to do anyway, which is protect the human side of the AI-ology.
So it's
Are you watching me?
Yes, the handshake.
The handshake is being pulled apart from the algorithm. And now I'm going to people, for God's sake, we need the handshake in the algorithm to really be stronger now than ever. We need to think. But last thing, you asked how it would happen. How can this happen now in the likes of the United States and Britain, who think that they're the greatest on this earth, have now pulled away from something that even all the other countries in the world have agreed to use, and by which they agreed to comply within those? When you get two
outliers,
Do you know that song, When Two Sides Go to War? Well, the fact is, I can't even remember the group. I'm sure someone will put it into the chat. But the reality is that we now have a situation where we can't even have a global agreement of getting to the base. We can't, as the Americans would say, no one's even willing to get the first base on this one. Actually, Paris showed there is a divide already there.
Yes, major divides emerging. The UK experience during COVID revealed significant gaps in data privacy measures for AI-driven learning systems. And on to your GDPR alignment area. Let's dissect a specific failure case from the UK's rapid e-learning adoption during COVID. Can you walk us through the possibilities of what can go wrong in that situation in terms of handling, what red flags could be missed, and what specific safeguards should be put in place?
He said, God, you've been tough on me this morning. You're asking me to do something that nearly every continental policy on AI has aspired. But I will say this, and thank you for asking. Ask the crazy person in the room, the double AI in his name. We know that the UK adoption of the AI-driven e-learning system,
Yes.
even the word e-learning, that brings me back to the 2000s. During COVID, it highlighted how inadequate initial data privacy measures prompted significant reforms, because when people realized that they had to change the manner in which they engaged, they jumped into what is available. So they jumped into everything from every form of communication platform that was out there, and they basically started to jump at, provide, share, and that. And what happened was, because this happened, what we saw, changes brought around processes that were not processes of consent. So, for example, I think a simple classroom situation. Children were given examinations. They had to sit some of their examinations, simple classroom tests online. And there was no sense of transparency. I mean, for example, I'll take it on this one. Let's take the worst scenario. If that happened today and you gave me an online test, because you couldn't see what I was doing, I could have another computer open beside me and my AI could be answering all the questions. I scored 100%. Now, when I get that information to you, automatically you took that information, you put it on, let's say, the likes of an Excel sheet, you sent it to your principal or your head teacher who was in a different part of Great Britain at that time. And where do you think that information went? That information went from A to B to C. And what were the restrictions that data on Daithí Ó Murchú, who basically might have been dyslexic, dyspraxic, dysorthographic on the spectrum, wasn't being accessed by others? So therefore, the transparency of the content or the consent process was compromised. And not only that, but if you look at the models that were being used during this, we saw a situation where all information which was being transmitted, and I'm just doing this through an education perspective, was compromised because there were no filters through which they went to protect the GDPR or the information there, because everyone was trying to deal with an extraordinary situation where no one really was thinking about bias or GDPR or compliance. Everyone was, the world shouted, my children aren't at school and teachers are doing nothing and they're all being paid. Well, I tell you this much, ladies and gentlemen, and those around the world, certain countries refused even to accept that schools are places where COVID existed, and the teachers were these super immune people that were in there that couldn't catch it. Duh. But for GDPR, the UK basically, and it's not just that, but their research showed that went out the window.
So in my research for today now, I took an instructive case from a UK university's implementation of the AI-driven attendance and engagement monitoring system during the rapid shift to online learning in 2020. So the timeline of failure unfolded like this. So in September 2020, the university deployed an AI system that tracked student engagement through multiple data points. Time spent on the learning platform, keystrokes, patterns, facial recognition for exam monitoring, and even behavioral patterns through webcam analysis. And then within 3 months, They faced multiple GDPR complaints and had to suspend the system. Why? The critical failure points were, first, they didn't conduct a proper data protection impact assessment, a DPIA, before deployment, and the rush to implement remote learning meant they skipped these crucial steps. They should have identified that collecting biometric data through facial recognition and behavioural patterns required explicit consent under the GDPR Article 9. Then they failed to implement the data minimisation. The system was collecting far more data than necessary and recording student behaviour in the home environment, for instance, which violated their privacy and proportionality principles. And thirdly, they didn't provide students with clear opt-out mechanisms. Basically, the red flags should have triggered intervention. The red flags were student complaints, teaching staff reporting that they couldn't explain to students how their data was being used, IT support tickets showing data was being stored outside of the EU, absence of documented data retention periods, and lack of transparency about AI decision-making processes. So today, the mitigation strategy should include mandatory DPIA, clear data minimization protocols, tiered consent mechanisms, regular algorithmic audits, documented data retention and deletion, and finally, clear procedures for students to access, correct, and delete their data. So it's just one example. And of course, we have the famous Cambridge Analytica scandal. Do you remember that from 2018? I mean, that was a huge lesson and cost dearly in that at the end, Cambridge Analytica filed for bankruptcy. Facebook was fined $5 billion by the FTC. And Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So you also, in section 5, you move on to supplementary global exemplars. Okay. So the Council of Europe Convention 108 plus emphasizes cross-border data protection. You have Singapore's personal data protection. So both of these take different approaches to handling cross-border data flows in education. Is data collection in each case still in its infancy? Would it be possible to make a comment as yet as to their efficacy or their drawbacks, their challenges, etc.?
You see, again, we're talking about exemplars here. The Council of Europe Convention 108++, and again, I put it in, that idea of cross-border data protection. Again, we've seen even from the Paris, even from President van der Leyen's Invest AI, even within the Paris summit, global, powerfully global continents could not even agree on this concept of cross-border data protection. Particularly, we're talking about collaborative international education projects. Sure. It's a good way of doing that. I actually believe that if you had the concept of collaborative international educational projects, as opposed to in Europe, and I would like to acknowledge the Commission and the Parliament, particularly the idea of Erasmus projects, where this is happening within European countries, and indeed third-party countries can come in. Those can be brought in, specifically a lot of African countries. This is giving a sense of developing, if I want to say, an AI literacy. Something like that is incredible. But again, if you've got stray animals running off like, and I'm sorry for calling them this, but stray animals running off like the UK and the United States who are refusing to even play the game. Actually, they're throwing the baby out of the bathwater. Actually, they're throwing the toys out of the bloody creche. Then how can you have this sense of even an acknowledgement of what data protection is, GDPR is?
So what's your definition of a game? You said to play the game.
Okay. It's an interesting one. And Teresa, isn't it funny? People have often asked me, they're playing a game. A game has 3 major footprints.
Right.
You cannot define something as a game unless, 1, there's at least 2 players.
Mm-hmm.
2, you have to have rules. Every game has to have rules. And thirdly, it has to have a start and an end point. If something doesn't have a start and an end, have at least 2 players and a set of rules, it can't be considered to be a game. Now, I challenge anyone out there to challenge on that. So if we're playing the game, we have to have at least 2 players. So if you're talking about international groups coming together, then you can have 2 or more. It has to have a start and an end. Over a period of time, we're doing this project to look at GDPR, to look at anti-bias, to look at this, and it must have a set of rules, an agreed set of rules, i.e. KPIs, objectives, work packages to define. And then we are now at the beginning of a stage whereby, maybe for the first time globally, we're actually looking at what Articles 4 and 5 are looking at, but looking at it. But again, I have to say, we already have 2 players are going, excuse me, we're not playing your game. Why? Because we're going to play our own game. Why? Because 1, we don't give a damn about the players. 2, we don't want to have a start and an end. Why? Because we don't want to be restricted by it. And number 3, sure, we're not going to have rules. Why? Because we're making up our own rules. What rules? Doesn't really matter because we're on an open AI and we can do what we bloody well want. So the fact is, it's a problem.
It has struck me forcibly in the last week that there's a not so much a game as a competition emerging, and a lack of agreement, and a race is on. And the trouble with this game is nobody knows the end point.
It's not so much nobody even knows the end point. No one even knows. Well, we all know the start point 50 years ago. And people often go, yeah, I wasn't there 50 years ago. Go back and research it. We're not going to, it was. But the reality is that our elephants in the room are now running around all over the place, and people seem to think they're butterflies.
I know. So when we look at the GDPR, the EU AI Act, the frameworks like Singapore, PDPA, we see different approaches to similar challenges. So what are the key differences? Is it even possible to pin them down in the approach in education, for instance? Where do they complement each other, and where do they potentially create compliance challenges? Now, I'm particularly interested in how educational institutions should navigate scenarios where these regulations seem to overlap or conflict.
If you ask me how can this work, is what you're asking, it's simple.
Yeah.
In my own house, if I'm a parent, in Ireland, we've just had Internet Safety Week.
Yes.
In my house, I'm the parent. I make the damn rules because I'm the adult. And in collaboration with everyone else in the house, we come up with a set of rules that we know is compliant, is ethically unbiased, and is collaboratively, from a familial perspective, acceptable in our house to do it, i.e., the EU AI Act is this wonderful umbrella, which is incredibly well written.
Yes.
It is put together. And within the EU, this is the big aspiration, which we know cannot be enforceable, even though we said in the very beginning, in certain ways there are fines. But you're going to have to prove this. We nearly have to come to a stage where, on a national level, like with Ireland and its AI Act, that we start looking at our own countries, working within this to protect ourselves, then make sure it's protected in the EU AI Act. But once we go bigger than national, we're in trouble.
Well, you talked about the parent-child scenario. What of the home where the parent is not a digital native, is not computer literate, and the child is dictating the shots? And that's a real problem. And you bring it further then, the parent as first educator, take it into the actual formal education setting where the teacher hasn't upskilled, really doesn't know what is going on, and uses and elsewhere. Teachers are meeting themselves coming back. So they see this as another added layer of inconvenience, whereas in actual fact, it's a baseline. It is a baseline for the future for going forward.
Pushing it now, Gary. The bottom line is that you know where we started. Exactly what the necessary steps are supposed to be in place before you even open anything that is deployed as an AI agent or tool or spoon of sugar. There was a research done, and forgive me if I overquote or underquote it, with X amount of hundreds of thousands of people in a certain country. They were asked, do they know about AI or who heard of it? They all said they heard of it. And they were asked, did they use it? 10% said that they would have used it. And then they were asked the question, how well do you use it? And 1% of the 10% showed that they had the capacity to use specific things. And then when it came to understanding what they were using, less than 0.1% of those people actually understood what they were doing. Now, you're talking about parents.
Well, that's alarming now when you put it.
It is alarming that if you think about it, if you have 1 million people, and let's say that 10 people, which is where we're at, actually understand what the hell they're using, that 10 of 1 million people on an open road with a Formula One car actually know what they're driving. If I put it that way to you. So, Teresa, what the EU AI Act is doing, again, I wish to acknowledge, is actually incredibly laudable. I praise it. I actually say, wow. But what you've just done is you have now told people that in order to get into heaven, get into Valhalla, in order someday that you will meet Allah or Muhammad, or someday that you will go beyond where you are now, unless you are prepared in the following way, you're not going to get there. And the reality is that all of these exemplars, whether it's the UK or whether it's Singapore, they're all trying to do this at a localized level, to interpret it locally so that it become a regional, national, continental, intercontinental, global, mondial. And the fact is that even if we look at what Articles 4 and 5 are demanding, I can tell you this much. To bring that level of literacy to any single human being right now, anywhere in the world, remember what I read out at the beginning?
That's right, yeah.
The word I'm going to use is to ensure that every person reaches that stage is, and God, I rarely use this word, every person, impossible. For every person. But we have to start somewhere. And we have to ensure that we're showing people how to interpret these outputs, how to recognize biases, how to be aware of ethical and legal implications. But that's not going to be easy.
Starting with the educators is a very definite starting point.
But how many educators are already using AI in their classrooms with their students, in their systems, because they were told that it's okay to do it, because the person who doesn't use AI right now, even though we all use it every single day in everything we're doing, even though we don't acknowledge it, the person who is not using it right now, or the student who is not using it right now, has cut off 2 fingers in their hand in many ways.
Left behind.
It doesn't mean they're abusing it. It means they're using it in a critically conscious, meaningful way to empower, engage, and enable them to achieve a task whereby utilizing the correct prompts, by creatively utilizing, communicating, collaborating to understand these, are reaching a collaborative stage or a unique stage of understanding the concept and allowing the AI in a personalized, intelligent tutoring way to guide them along. But now we have to say that the teacher in that classroom has to actually nearly tick 5 boxes to ensure the students have ticked 5 boxes before they can actually do it. In other words, the horse is gone. The elephants are out, and now you're trying to corral them again.
So let's try to pin it down. There's a significant gap between stating that educators must understand AI processes and actually achieving that understanding. Could we break down that realistically? What realistically needs to happen, say, in the like of Ireland in the next 6 to 12 months for a typical secondary school teacher who might be teaching history or literature, for instance, to develop genuine competency in explaining algorithmic decision-making to their students? I'm particularly interested there in the minimum viable knowledge they need versus what the framework suggests.
Okay, let's take a simple reality. The Irish curriculum. We'll take the curriculum like it was in any country. We will take, it doesn't really matter, any topic. The first thing that we have to know is, if we choose a model, an AI agent, and remember, an agent is different to agentic AI. An AI agent it does what it says in the tin.
Right, yeah.
This is a tin of beans, open the tin and you get beans. Agentic AI this is a tin of beans, but the minute you open it, if you don't like beans, it'll change it to peas, it'll change it to mushy peas, it'll change it to carrots. It's ever evolving, changing that. So, first thing, technical knowledge is something that the education centres that are brought in, the 21 of them around Ireland by the Education Act of Ireland, will have to, first of all, look at the agents that are there and, for example, give teachers the technical knowledge of how to use those agents in a meaningful, mindful, soulful, and conscious way. So that is continuous professional development. The technical knowledge then must then be given and turned into experience of using these models in a collaborative way with the teachers in the classroom to see how can I gain experience with this agent to achieve what I'm looking to achieve, to engage, enable, and empower my students to achieve what I wanted to do. Then we have to educate them on what this model, this technical knowledge, this experience, educate them on what can go wrong, how you can use the wrong prompts, what are the correct ways of prompting it, educate them on what is bias in this, what is not bias. And then lastly, believe it or not, I'm going to use this, I said it first, train them in how to use this technical knowledge so that they can gain the experience that's ever changing, so they can use in an educated way with their students, how they can be trained to do this so that the context of the AI system they're using or agent can be used by themselves or individuals or groups to comply with everything that is laid out in the risks in the EU and within their own school environments, within the national policy and the EU policy. So those four are vital. Continuous professional development, going back to the beginning to understand from stage one. Again, I have to be careful here, Lisa, that the agent they're using, because if that agent is an agentic AI, then all of a sudden the 400-meter track becomes a cross-country race, becomes a marathon, becomes a trail, becomes an intergalactic, because it's constantly changing. So we have to start somewhere. Choose an AI agent that we use. Technical knowledge. One, we have to know how, why, where, when, what, and eventually training them how to use this in a educo, leading forward in a conscious, mindful, meaningful, soulful way to achieve the aims and objectives of the curriculum, to empower, engage, and enable their students. And this can be done, but too many people out there right now are too busy throwing out all of these agents, showing them everything, and they're not looking at the idea of having to know the technical knowledge. If I was to equate it, it's simple. This is a Formula One car. Now, let's first of all look at the technical knowledge of what that actually means. What does it mean? Strip down the car. And once you understand that, the capacity, the capability of it, once you understand what that is, then at that particular point, when you see it, you're now able to say, now that I have the technical knowledge, doesn't mean I have to know everything about it. I can now gain experience by getting into the car, feeling it, looking at the Triptronic, getting a sense of doing it in a simulated environment, in an open environment, in a protected environment of a track. And then when I do that, then I can start to educate myself about what it can go, how fast can it go, how slow can it go, how can I change the gears, what can I do? And then I need to be trained on what I did and didn't do right and collaborate in that so that I learn in a constant evolving way. And once I do that, now there is your baseline. Now, there's my challenge to anyone in the world. And the UNESCO competencies in AI teacher and student at least show, with the OECD procedures and the EU Act, it shows how you can actually then reach certain competencies along that way of achieving those four things.
And we're back into
they're becoming important.
So while the UNESCO's framework emphasizes AI literacy beyond technical knowledge, we're seeing vastly different cultural and educational approaches to privacy across nations, from China's state-centric model to Germany's strict privacy culture. So how can education institutions develop a coherent approach to teaching AI ethics and privacy when the underlying cultural and regulatory assumptions vary so dramatically? We're back to the changes again, and the things that work against the global imprint.
Most people that would listen to this have flown on an aeroplane. And at the very start of every flight, you have the air stewards standing up. And they give you what's called the safety part. And one of the parts in the safety is simple. Put your own mask on first before you care for others. So I think, Teresa, that the more we look at the global thing, the more we have to look at our own situation. We need to put on our own mask first and define it, and then we need to look bigger.
So you've a very detailed AI literacy framework on your blog this week. What are the prerequisites to ensure that this actually works in reality at the coalface? What do you think? Like, obviously, there's technical prerequisites, there's organisational prerequisites, there's the human resourcing prerequisites, there's the legal and policy prerequisites, and there's the, I suppose, the resource prerequisites, sufficient budget, etc., the time allocation, all of that. How can schools govern for that? How can they be ensured that all of that is in place? They're forever following the tails when it comes to financing, resourcing, etc. They're hanging on by the skin of their teeth, as they say here, at the moment.
Indeed, there are many schools out there in the past used to laugh and say, we barely have enough paper, barely have enough money to buy toilet paper, never mind deal with the bigger issues.
Schools have been known to ask children to bring in a toilet roll.
Yeah, well, I'm sure in the past, and in that situation, I can, and you know what, God help us. But if we look at the AI framework, we look at the literacy framework, indeed, I think from an EU AI Act and global definition, there are 7 aspects to literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're very aspirational. Like we said, coming back to number 1, the technical side, the hardware and software in schools. Now, to have hardware and software, you have to basically provide the necessary funding. But I see a certain gentleman who is way up there globally in the AI saying that the mobile phones are now no longer going to be the future. Actually, mobile phone is gone. That we're going to be using more in the sense of glasses with connectivity built into us. What we call about the neural learning implant. Earlier on when we spoke about that, we're not going to go there with singularity yet. So hardware, software is vital, that you have the necessary hardware and software. And what is the necessary hardware and software when we're being told that that which we have already now is something that's going to become obsolete, which it always will, but it's not going to be even prepare us for the future of now. But let's presume that we have the necessary hardware and software. Now, information and data literacy. In order to have the information and data literacy, we have to be able to ensure that that information is real, true, authentic, conscious, meaningful. And the data literacy is everything we've already spoken about to make someone literate. So that's even only stage 2 of the framework. And then communication and collaboration, as I said, if you do it globally, we found in Paris it won't exist. So it's going to have to be communication and collaboration at a local level. And in Ireland's cases, the Education Centre is working with the Department of Education under our national policy, which is complying with EU policy, to come down into the very local level. Number 4, content creation. Content creation is going to become vital. But again, how do you ensure the non-biased protection of, for example, GDPR, within that content creation, that it's done ethically. Again, considering that we can't even come up with a definition of ethics. But again, that's number 4 in the framework. And safety being number 5. The safety of every single user who is out there looking at something which has been deployed, an AI agent or an agentic AI, which is out there. To me, that is virtually impossible. And then number 6 in the framework of literacy is problem solving. Well, I think that that's something human beings are incredible at when it comes to problem solving in a critical, conscious, creative way, that AI is still not there. Still not there. But hey, still not there. Even though Professor the other night said that was again dystopian. Still not there. And number 7, career competences, preparing. I mean, people said to me once, define education. I said, education is the most beautiful environment that prepares students for the world which does not yet exist. And how do you prepare someone for the world or society which does not yet exist? You prepare them in everything that it makes us human: empathy, love, unconditional love, creativity. Oh, by the way, sorry. Oops, all the things that you cannot assess.
Yes.
So therefore, does that now mean we have to take a whole new look at what in reality the frameworks we use for assessment? And there's a lot happening in that area. But the only way that we can ensure that we have any form of this AI literacy under those steps is to come back to the handshake, the human side of the human AIology. And once we work with the fact that we are a beautiful species and regain our power in this, because I'm listening to people who seem to have nearly accepted that they've given away the power to AI. Now, in many ways they have. But you know what, Teresa? If you were in a room and you said to me, Daithí, it's too bright, I'm hurting because it's too bright, guess what I'd do?
Pull the blinds,
Or turn off the light.
Yeah.
But I pull the blinds and I turn off the light. But you can keep moaning all day going, it's too bright, and you feel powerless. The fact of the matter is, what's stopping you from turning off the light and pulling the blinds?
So I note from your blog, Estonia and Netherlands, they showcase sophisticated security approaches like homomorphic encryption and zero trust architecture. And you go into that in some detail. These systems require significant technical expertise to implement and maintain. Have you any specific example where education institutions actually successfully transitioned to these advanced security measures?
Oh, you see, again, if you take, for example, you take Estonia. The Estonia had an e-residency education program. Okay, what it did was it nearly, as for the want of a word, it anonymized student data.
Yeah.
If you take a situation whereby, I often say to principal teachers or leaders, when you're ever writing something, remember, once you write something, it exists. So put up at the top of everything you ever write that is in any way referring to a human being as confidential and without prejudice. So you're writing in the third person, confidential and without prejudice. In other words, you're anonymizing it. So if all student data was anonymized, in other words, referring specifically to, let's say, number 1, 1A2, 3A5, and only you knew what that referred to by something which was actually not available on the systems. For example, every student attending Ireland would have been given a roll number when they enrolled. And that roll number could be used as a means of identifying that student, not in the open AI systems of data sharing, but in a practical way of it being written there that can only be actually accessed manually.
Yeah.
Now, that would anonymize the student data, and that means it can be used effectively, safeguarding the individual privacy. And indeed, the OECD showed that in 2022, and Estonia's e-residency education program exemplified that. If you take what we call the zero trust architecture, that's a big one in the Netherlands. It reduced incidents of unauthorized access by requiring strict verification of users in real time, and that was brought in 2023. But again, if you look at people to bring in the sense of, it's like there are lots of people out there who do this. If you access your bank, you have to do what's called a double authentication or a triple authentication. So in many ways, you're trying, but the only problem I see with that is, if you write an algorithm which is faster than your capacity to authenticate, it can get in there before you. But the fact is, what happened in the Netherlands is a wonderful way whereby very strict rules of authentication before you access. So these are two examples that have been put out there that are actually working. And in many ways, I know in Ireland, a lot of schools adopt this by giving students anonymized ways of being acknowledged when it comes to a face-to-face, but it never mentions the name. So there are things that are doing that. But again, Teresa, with the way AI is developing right now, you nearly have to go back to the sense of what I've written, I have in that book there, and there's no one going to scan it into a system which can be accessed, because anything that is up on the net right now, anything that is available or is accessible right now, anything that is out there, what we call, for the want of a better word, in the cloud or beyond, is accessible.
Of course. You've written in section 5 about promoting global and continental collaboration. Cross-border educational collaborations require the harmonization of data protection frameworks. You talk about the EU-US data privacy framework. You talk about the African Union's AI strategy 2022. So while these frameworks and Rwanda's AI program, for instance, present an idealistic view of cross-border collaboration, we're seeing increasing tensions between different AI governance models. The EU's regulatory approach, for example, the US market-driven model, and China's state-centric vision. How realistic is harmonized data protection in education when we're witnessing what appears to be a technological Cold War developing between these power blocks? I'm particularly interested to hear in your assessment of how education institutions should navigate these competing spheres of influence.
Let me start big. Big is that Paris showed that it's not going to happen. Right. Even though everyone got together and they all had a big huddle and a cuddle and they all came together, they all agreed that they would disagree. The vast majority said they would agree, and then 2 said that they wouldn't agree. So I come back to the point again. We nearly have to now go back to ensuring that this happens within the individual school, that they're compliant with what we said, what AI literacy is: knowledge, technical knowledge, education, training, etc. And that's done within the national, like within Ireland, our national AI policy, and that's compliant with Europe. So instead of us looking here, we now nearly have to come back down here. And in doing that, though, Teresa, let's be clear. Yeah. I am fully cognizant of the fact that once something is out there, and when I say out there, I hope people understand what I mean. It's like the www. Once it's out there, it can be hacked, it can be accessible, but let's forget about that. We know the elephants in the room, the Darth Vaders. If we can take care of always to thine own self be true, and it can pass neither day nor night, that thou cannot be false to any other man, which at that time was man. If you can only be true to yourself within your own school, complying with what is there nationally in the accepted regulations that are compliant with what we consider in Europe, then that's the best we can do to protect ourselves. But the chances of this being an international, globally accepted procedure or policy or manner of behavior, God, I say this, has been shown in the last couple of days in Paris to be fiddle-dee-diddle-do, because certain people believe they're better than others and they need to be ahead and they need to do things better. And what they're not doing is realizing that if that elephant stands on them, that elephant will crush them. And the more we give power to the algorithm, the less we acknowledge our own special handshake. Our humanity is beautiful species of human being that can be so cruel, but so beautiful.
Our inaction is giving way to the algorithm.
I think our humanity of, I don't want to play with him, she doesn't like me, they aren't nice to us. We're so busy, I don't want to use the verb. We're so busy arguing with one another that we're actually forgetting what is really happening here, what's really going on here.
In Section 8, you talk about preparing for AGI and ASI with UNESCO's long-term vision. UNESCO's calls for adaptive governance frameworks and long-term planning to prepare educational institutions for complexities of AGI and ASI. So while UNESCO and the AI for Good Summit advocate for preparing educational institutions for AGI and ASI risks, we're still struggling with basic AI literacy and data protection. How can institutions meaningfully prepare for hypothetical future risks when they're barely managing the current ones?
Back to the 4 steps I already laid out.
Yes.
And go back local, start small, look at your own thing, put on your own mask first, start to breathe, and then put the mask on those around you. Again, the whole idea is don't think big in this, because let the others think big. Let the EU find its corner with China, with India, with United Kingdom, even though I put them in there now because they seem to think that they're good because they moved aside the United States and South America and the African continental policy. And you look to the children in front of you in that classroom, and you look to what we say the education systems can do by preparing you in all the 4 areas so that at least you are ready in your world to bring these children to where education was meant to bring them, leading them forward as human beings. That's all I can say.
Sure. And then you obviously go to the counter arguments. So my final question, Daithí, as we rush to implement AI in education by February 2025, are we perhaps asking the wrong question? Instead of how do we ensure safe AI implementation in schools, shouldn't we be asking how much AI do we actually want in our educational systems? How can we actively seek to cultivate the soft skills and strengthen the handshake in a human-centric future? Particularly given that we're seeing concerning patterns emerge that mirror past technological missteps like the Cambridge Analytica scandal. What's your honest assessment of what we might be blindly accelerating towards another systemic failure in our eagerness to digitize education? What's your opinion?
I apologize, people. It is my human opinion that we are at one of those incredible times of crossroads in humanity's evolution, with what AI has been doing for the past 50 years, but now on a super, nearly adrenaline accelerated route in the last 36 months in particular. I don't think we need to ask the questions that you were asking there, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't know if they're the right questions, with the deepest of respect to you. Because I'll tell you why. All the training in the world will not prepare you for the tsunamic earthquake, the volcanic revolution, which singularity and ASI and superintelligence, now the mega systems, are going to start to deliver globally. Nothing is going to prepare us for what AI is doing right now in the private sector, particularly in biopharma and militarily. And the fact that the big companies have said in the last week that they will not sign up to guaranteeing any non-surveillance or use in a terroristic perspective on the very word of looking at everyone as being game to be examined, explored in every crevasse of their lives. And when you see that happening, if you were to say to me, Daithí, I have to be protected from this, then I would say to you, go into the deepest part of the Amazon, turn off everything that ever exists, and go back to Neanderthal human being or Homo sapiens. And that's about the only way you can do it.
But unless humankind appreciate their own uniqueness and the beauty of it and their own potential, they're going to give way to merging with the machine. And
what's behind all of this, Teresa? What's behind all of this?
I'm taking you to the whole question.
Yeah.
We're in the battle for our souls. We're in the battle for our unless we realize that AI is the tool to be used to help us towards achieving our true potential as humans, unless we retain that space, humankind is finished as we know it.
Yes, maybe, but the fact is the handshake in the algorithm. But I will say this. People are seemingly not even addressing the fact that AI is big money now. AI is worth billions.
That's what it's all about.
Profit. Yeah, but the fact is, it's profit. So do you, very often as is the case, those making the billions don't care about the humanity or the human side of what is happening there. It's all, it could be, the fact is that we have to take back the power ourselves.
Exactly. Humanity needs to stand up.
The handshake needs to be the handshake that guides the algorithm, not the algorithm guiding the handshake. In other words, the dog should wag the tail, not the tail wagging the dog. And as long as, and that's why I like the EU AI Act, even though I know that on a global sense it's restricting Europe. But President von der Leyen announced the mega systems that will allow the small one-person edtech company to actually access the global capacity of AI and can do it within the EUA. Now, that's a good move, that. But the fact is, there are unscrupulous groups and people and companies out there who just want to make money makes the world go round. So the fact is, we have to look on the tools of AI in a way that allow us to enhance the humanity of our species in a way that is, I repeat it again, 4 things: meaningful, mindful, soulful by any other word, and conscious. And once we keep those 4 in front of us, if I was using an AI agent, I'd say, is that a meaningful one, or is it just a load of rubbish? Is it a game, as in a game, or something else? Is it mindful? Does it bring me to a place of well-being, mindfulness? It's not forcing me to do things that I want to do in crazy ways that are being reported about now. Is it soulful? Does it connect with me as a human being to make me feel good about what's happening? And I know people will out there say, what's good, Daithí? No, you know what I mean, guys. Don't split hairs on this. Meaningful, mindful, soulful, and conscious. If we as human beings look at something consciously and we pull ourselves back, there's no way that we could accept as a species that brutality, inhumanity, butchering, murder, starvation in a world where there's more food produced in one day to feed the world's population 4 times over, and hundreds of millions are dying of starvation. How can we as a species consciously accept that that is meaningfully, mindfully, or soulfully right? I'm not even use the word morally, because that's different.
Our richest individuals could, in one swipe, offer the solution to that inequality.
But not even the richest. We have all this food around the world that we dispose of every day because they don't conform.
So it's
because the food is this. It's in many ways, it is humankind's inhumanity to humankind that we see. But AI, again, is north, south, east, west, up, down, left, right, black, white, not grey. Therefore, the EU AI Act, Articles 4, 5, even though I've been very critical of it,
it's well-intentioned.
It is incredibly well-intentioned. And within that, the means by which we can prepare our local, within our regional, within our national, within our continental, to do this is right. But all the babies in the creche need to get into the creche. And right now, we've got 2 babies outside going, I don't want to play with you, because somehow they think they're better than everyone else.
The multi-layered in terms of it's like any of the other races that have gone on throughout history, and it's multi-layered in terms of showing power, and it's all tied into economics as well, and the economic health of countries, etc. It's a unless the human, in my estimation, educates himself, herself, we're going nowhere.
Well, time for humanity to stand up and go HUMAINAITY, humanity, just like DAITHAI, stand up and says, guys, there's nothing wrong with the elephant in the room, as long as the elephant and ourselves coexist in one space that is meaningful, mindful, soulful, conscious. Then issues like GDPR can be addressed globally. Ethical issues, which will never be the same because it means different things. But there is a basic ethical reality that I think most people who are human would agree to, which is the SDGs. Everyone has a right to.
Yes.
If we go back to the basics, instead of arguing the hypothetics of something, the basics, look at those 17 SDGs. And look at what it says about humanity. Look at what we're talking about equity of opportunity, not equality. Look at what it says about the rights of the child under the United Nations, UNESCO and what it's doing. That deep down, we already have this baseline of accepted ethical practice, but it doesn't suit certain people who are on the highway to hell to comply with those when it doesn't conform to their perception of how they exist within the world. Whether it is from war to conflict, whether it's coup d'etat to doing things which are unimaginable, whether it's human beings being forced into situations where they take actions that are unthinkable. The world, instead of thinking, the more I think, the more we reach Blog 9A, the more I think of AI singularity, agentic AI, super intelligent AI and out there, the more I realize we need to come back to ourselves being true, what Shakespeare said. Always to yourself be true. And if we're true, then we are human beings who know that AI is being used for good.
Yes.
Imagine this, Teresa. I want to finish positively. AI can look at global weather patterns. It can see over the last 100, 200 years, if they're recorded, where are the best places to plant certain crops that grow better than others, how we can plant certain things to feed planet Earth, to give the lungs of planet Earth oxygen, how we can actually deal with humanity in an equitable way. And it can do this. You can take drones that can plant 1,000, 10,000 trees a day. Plant crops so they will grow, feed the world, bring people, so that the countries where there is no education, countries where women can't even moan at one another and they're going to be put to death. For God's sake, for Alice, for man, it doesn't matter. The thing is, human beings, some of them deep down, are just selfish little yolks that seem to think they can bring money with them. But my mother, again, God bless you, ma'am, wherever you are out there. My mother used to say, there are no pockets in a shroud.
Yeah,
you can't take it with you. So humanity needs to go back to point A, which is what is it that exists? And then AI becomes the algorithm that actually meaningfully, mindfully, soulfully, consciously connects with the handshake.
Looked at, you see, it can be looked at on many levels. You need to look at it on the individual level, then the organizational level, the corporate level, and that's where it diverges different pathways. Then, so
we need to look at ourselves and literacy. So that's what Blog 9A was put in for, Teresa, because I just felt that it had to be there. Blog 10, I'm afraid, people, if you're listening, Blog 10 takes Daithí to a futuristic concept of where we're actually going. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you. And I look forward to our final conversation on Blog 10 next week. Okay. Thank you so much.
So
the handshake lives on.